In our previous Evidence for God devotional, we referred to Stephen Jay Gould's fourfold presentation for Uniformitarianism. Stephen Jay Gould was especially well known when I was in high school and through the 90s, 80s and 90s, beyond even his death in 2002. He was a paleontologist studying the history of life on Earth through the analysis of the fossil record. He was also an evolutionary biologist and science historian, and he was known as a professor at Harvard. He authored more than 20 books and appeared in numerous documentaries and interviews. And so when Stephen Jay Gould talked, people listened. His defense of uniformitarianism is summed up with his quote, "Uniformity of law is the principle that the laws of nature are the same now as they were in the past," end quote. And that's true, except when the lawgiver, God Almighty, steps into space and time. You see, Gould's statement was basically a denial of creation itself. So Gould's first point of the 4 points in his presentation was called Uniformity of Law. I want to quote him for the record, and then I'll give my summary. Quote, "The assumption of spatial and temporal invariance of natural laws is by no means unique to geology, since it amounts to a warrant for inductive inference, which, as Bacon showed nearly 400 years ago, is the basic mode of reasoning in empirical science." Listen close. "Without assuming this spatial and temporal invariance, we have no basis for extrapolating from the known to the unknown, and therefore no way of reaching general conclusions from a finite number of observations," end quote. Spoken like a true professor. Now, I wanted to quote the original source material just to be on record and fair, but some may have had trouble understanding what he actually was saying, so let me boil it down for us. If we allow for God's intervention in which God violates basically the natural law with miracles and or supernatural events like the global flood of Noah, for example, then we can't really know anything, he claims. In other words, the idea of a living God working miracles or performing supernatural events would destroy our ability to accurately do science. That's his claim. But it's absurd. Number one, basing your conclusion on an undesired answer isn't scientific or reasonable. Even if Gould was right about the implication that God intervening would somehow ruin science, that has no bearing on whether or not the facts demonstrate that God was involved in creation from the beginning and has done miracles and performed supernatural events since then. And secondly, his conclusion isn't true to begin with. God can and does enter space and time. He created space and time. And of course, the main event of this sort was when God came as a child, born in Bethlehem in the person of Jesus Christ, to die for the sins of the whole world, and then rise from the dead, conquering sin and death. Sadly, Gould and all who follow him, they want to kick God out of his own creation, in their own minds at least, and pretend that we must do so in order to do science. But their whole premise of uniformity of law is presumption and not based on empirical evidence. It's an unscientific conclusion made without scientific evidence. Gould's first premise for uniformitarianism, called the uniformity of law, is nothing but baseless prejudice. They basically say it has to be this way, so it is this way. It's really a childish and absurd argument to make in order to try to make your case in science. But the implications are eternal. As Gould and others who follow this line, they continue with this anti-scientific religious doctrine that they hold in order to reject the miracles of God, including the incarnation, substitutionary death, and bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ as God in human form. Now, we're going to continue this discussion next time, but in the meantime, please understand that the God of the Bible is omnipotent, miracle-working. He's a supernatural lawgiver. The only eternally uniform power is not our universe, but the maker of our universe, and his name is Jesus Christ. John 1:3, all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made.